You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
What is going on, my friends, Los Angeles? Welcome into the LA Football Show here on the LA Football Network, your destination for Los Angeles football, coming at you on a Monday after a wild weekend of football. 3-1 LA football goes. This is your Trojan Huddle USC segment of the LA Football Show. Joining me as always, the Madman, Mr. Jamal Madney. What's up, brother? How was the weekend? How you doing?
Doing well, Ryan. Excited to talk some ball this week. Always fun whenever the majority of the LA teams can win. It's always so much more pleasant to talk about the recap. So excited to get into it with you as always.
Yeah, I think we've only had one 4-0 weekend, maybe two, but it hasn't been a lot. But 3-1 we will take. But like we said, this is the Trojans portion. So that's a 1-0 for this show, which we're going to get into after I don't know if I call it a big win, but, still a win, still gets them to 8-1 on the season, 41-35 over northern rival Cal. And it was a wild game with a lot of interesting stuff that happened, some good things, a lot of bad, at least on one side of the football, which we'll get all into. Show is always brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag today and use the promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. You're going to get a 50% welcome bonus on your first time deposit. You can take that welcome bonus, bet on any game, any sport, really anything. You got the election tomorrow. They got politic bets you can make. I would stay away from those, but if you want to, sure, go right ahead. But football is where our hearts lie with betting, and obviously they got all the games, all the action, only at betonline.ag. Promo code BELIEVE. Tell them the guys at the LA Football Network sent you. So, Jamal, we were both at the game in beautiful SoCal. It was a beautiful sunset cascading over the Collie and downtown Los Angeles. A 7:30 kickoff. So the sunset happened before kickoff happened. We did have daylight saving times that night. Got an hour back after the game. I think I was at the stadium till what felt like 4 a.m., but with the savings time, it was probably like 2 a.m. But we got the win. Initial shots, Jamal, before we really get into it.
Yeah, Ryan, a win is a win. And, it's one step closer to this incredible victory bell that we're going to have in 2 weeks. So there's only one test remaining. Obviously, Caleb Williams, another spectacular game. This is now 3 consecutive incredible ball games that he's had where he's been north of 350 yards and 4+ touchdowns, and seems like he can do it with any receivers on the field. This week was Michael Jackson III and Tahj Washington stepping up. The week before was Tahj Washington and Kyle Ford. The week before that was Addison and Mario. It just doesn't seem to matter who's out on the field for Caleb Williams, for SC to be this decorative offense that they are. And then obviously the concerns beyond that on the defensive side of the ball, but really stemming from injuries. No Gentry, no Goforth. And I think that's the biggest concern for USC moving forward is they're going to need to get healthy to beat UCLA. This is a team that cannot beat UCLA if they aren't 100% healthy, given the already challenges at the depth positions that they have defensively. So that's going to be really the key thing to sort of monitor and look at this week is, can Gentry get a little bit of run? Can Goforth get a little bit of run against Colorado? And can these receivers come back on the field even for a little bit to feel like they got some rhythm and lather going into November 19th? So a win is a win, but it's challenging when you give up 35 points to a Cal team that really seemingly was offensively challenged the whole year. So certainly not something to write home about, but the bottom line is go ask Alabama, go ask Clemson, go ask some of these teams how difficult it is to win week over week in college football. So you always want to learn from the victories rather than from the defeats.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. And, I was in the locker room after the game, or I guess the press room after the game. No one's allowed in locker rooms anymore nowadays, but, seeing the players and coaches. And so we'll get all into that in a little bit and what the kind of the vibe was and what was said by coaches, most notably Alex Grinch, defensive coordinator. I thought had some really interesting comments and sound bites there, and the players as well, Calen Bullock and all these guys in there. So we'll get into that in a minute, but yeah, definite takeaway. I mean, this this Caleb Williams kid, we say it every week, so we sound like a broken record, but he is just so special, man. Like, it is, unless something drastic happens, he will absolutely, without a question, be the number 1 overall pick in, 2 years or in 2 drafts from now, 2024. That is just how good he is and what he's able to do. And the fact that who they're missing, I mean, you brought it up, still missing Jordan Addison, still missing Mario Williams. And I had mentioned during the game that you could tell at instances that they were missing those players. Some of the complexity of the offense, some of the creativity, and some of the consistency was lacking when you don't have your top 2 receivers. But it was said and done, they didn't miss a lot of beats, if you will. And Caleb, that's just how special he is to kind of spread the ball around. And I think it shows how deep this receiving class truly is, who we talked about beginning of the year. This is far and away the best receiving core in the Pac-12. And now they're truly proving it in back-to-back weeks, missing their top 2. And you have guys like Michael Jackson and Tahj Washington really stepping up. You mentioned Kyle Ford last week. So a lot of fun. Michael Jackson, that dude is a burner, had a lot of fun. There was a play, if you remember, late in the game, Jamal, really creative play design from Lincoln Riley. And it was like the perfect time to do it. Because the thing with, if you call them trick plays or gimmick plays, whatever you want to call them, it's all about when you do them and when they can be successful. And it was that handoff sweep to the right. There was a pitch reverse to the left for, I think it was a 40-something yard gain. And Jackson just had nothing but open field, but he showed you the speed and the wheels on that play. Plus obviously the 2 deep touchdowns that he had as well. So another star in the making at the USC wide receiver U, which is exciting. And then, for the negatives, obviously the defense. And, you mentioned it. It's never good when Jack Plummer looks like Jake Plummer, former ASU, Jake the Snake, because that's how good he looked, throwing for, I believe, a season high. I don't quote me on that, but definitely up there in season high with 406 yards and 3 touchdowns. Really just looked extremely comfortable, looked poised. Hats off to him. He obviously has to make the plays, but I think SC would tell you, experts would tell you that a quarterback like him at this stage in this season should not be putting up those kind of numbers, you don't think, against this powerful of a team. So disappointing effort from the defense, but they got the stops when they had to. They ended the game there at the end, and obviously the offense is just special, and I think can only get better as well.
Yeah, Ryan, I think you said it best. I will say it was the first game where there was a little bit of a drop-off, you could tell, at the wide receiver position, where these guys are starting to miss those top-end talent. I think Michael Jackson's a really special kid, really good kid. Tahj Washington, we know what he brings to the table in terms of his blocking ability, but then also his ability to finish great routes and that juke ability and that speed. But this was the first time USC punted 5-6 times over the course of the game. They got outright stopped 5 times. And I think the 41 points were more of a product of Cal earlier in the game not being able to possess the ball and ultimately give USC the ball back pretty quickly, and that Cal defense wearing down, especially in the middle 2 quarters of that game. So you could tell that Lincoln Riley was trying some other things. Raleek Brown is not quite what we thought he was going to be as a true freshman. I think he's going to be a phenomenal player, but I don't think he's quite what we thought he was going to be just as a true freshman. No real usage of Austin Jones. So Travis Dye did his thing, 15 for 98, but looked like he was getting a little bit beat up there. And then the outside receivers, Tahj Washington, Michael Jackson, both going for over 100 yards. But they looked human for the first time, this offense, in several weeks. For the first time since maybe that Washington State game. And really fortunate to get out of there. Ryan, on the defensive side of the ball, not only was it a season high, not only was it a career high for Jack Plummer, but he beat his career high by over 130 yards. His previous career high was 278 yards passing. This guy never had a 300-yard passing game in his career, and he goes for 406. So really concerning there when you talk about the likes of a possible DTR, a possible Bo Nix down the line. They're really going to need to tighten that up. So I think for me, obviously really special in terms of some individual talent. They got to get healthy, Ryan. This team is not good enough to beat UCLA right now if they don't have Gentry, if they don't have Goforth, and they don't have their top 2 guys. Michael Jackson, great player, young player. Tahj Washington, great player, young player. as great as Caleb Williams is, I don't think he can single-handedly beat an Oregon or a UCLA with who he has right now. So really excited to see this team get healthy, because when they are healthy, you could argue there's nobody, certainly in the Pac-12, that can stay with them offensively, and they can be a really credible threat and an outside shot at making that CFP and making some noise.
Yeah, and they play Friday this week, so not super likely that they will be fully healthy, but luckily they play the likes of Colorado, and then they get that extra day of rest before that big game at UCLA. So it kind of almost bodes in their favor based on opponents that they play an earlier week game this week before that big November 19th Victory Bell matchup. Because getting healthy is absolutely going to be pertinent for them. Especially on defense, but especially on offense, because let's be honest, this UCLA USC game might be first to 100. And so the offense is going to have to score every time they touch the ball. They can't be putting 4 or 5 times and still put up 40. They're going to have to put up 60 plus, I think, in order to win that game, which for us is going to be a ball to watch. It's going to be a blast, but for true just USC fans, it's going to be a nail biter all the way through. So I want to get Jamal a little bit to the press conference after. And what I liked about it that, I think is what you would expect based on Lincoln Riley's pedigree, based on a lot of these transfer players that have come from winning programs, based on the expectations for this team going in. I think it's not surprising, but at the same time, you don't always see that. I know we've talked about, and this is the SC ship, we've talked about on the UCLA side sometimes that, and they do it after every game, so I'm not knocking UCLA, but they have the fight song and they're throwing the water bottles after every win and whatnot. And again, I'm not in the locker room per se, but the vibe in that press conference felt like a loss. Like this team was not happy whatsoever. Even the offense was not happy whatsoever. The defense was extremely upset. They know they have to be better. Alex Grinch, I've seen him many times throughout this season, since he's been with this program. And, he's a pretty straightforward guy. He doesn't sugarcoat things, but this was one of the most straightforward I've seen him, basically saying like, look, I came here to coach defense, and right now I'm not coaching good defense. And these players signed up to play defense, and right now we're not playing defense. We want to be a part of the win, not just a product of the win. And right now, that's what the defense is. They're just a byproduct, riding the coattails of the offense. And so for me, it was good to hear it. I know it's all just talk. We got to see the improvement, but to hear the coach and the players saying, we recognize that we are literally contributing 0 to this 8-1 season, essentially. And we want to contribute. We want at the end of the game for players and media and say, oh, wow, look at these great stands the defense had. Look at what they did. And I know early in the year we had all the turnovers, but now that has dried up a little bit. So is it correctable after 9 games, or is this just what the defense is? We'll see. I think there definitely are things to correct. Coach Grinch mentioned the scheme, and this is where I'll toss it back to you, Jamal, if you want to touch on this. But, a lot has been talked about Grinch's scheme in general. Just, is it a good scheme overall? And so he's kind of touched on that. He was asked afterwards, and a lot of what he talked about is, we switch up a lot between zone and man. Like we're not a true zone scheme. We're not a true man scheme. We want to do things that then forces the offense to think we're doing one thing when we can do another, but we just haven't played good enough in either zone or man to make an offense second guess themselves. They've been able to pick and choose whatever they wanted, and we've been the one playing catch up instead of playing offensively on defense. So obviously that will be addressed this week in practice. They get a really good get right game against Colorado, but we thought this Cal game was a get right game for the defense after giving up a lot of yards to Arizona. So we'll see, Jamal. I think there's definitely can be improvement. And the biggest thing, like you mentioned, is getting healthy again. But I was at least happy to see that the disappointment, even after 8th in the country, even after 8-1, even after one of the best starts for a first-time head coach ever for a USC program. But you can tell this team knows that they're better, knows that there's more on the table, knows that they can do more. And so I think that's what separates good teams from great teams, and why I think this team has the potential to be great. Will they be? We'll see.
Yeah, Ryan, I think you're spot on there. And I think it's the culture that Riley is setting forth in terms of expectations. Ryan, for all the talk about 8th in the country and 8-1 and the opportunity to win the Pac-12, the opportunity to make the CFP, the margin for error is so fine. Because if USC loses to UCLA on November 19th, they're going to the Holiday Bowl. They finished 4th in the conference. So we can talk all we want about the ranking and the record, it's all on paper right now. It's like an investor where they're seeing returns all on paper. There hasn't been a liquidity event yet. Their bank account hasn't been full yet. And so all of these records and rankings all on paper right now, because if they don't win against UCLA on November 19th, they're playing in San Diego at the Holiday Bowl. And I think for where this team was, I think that would be a huge disappointment. So A, I think they understand that. B, not only is this defense riding the coattails of the offense, USC's 8-1 despite the defense. The defense is a liability. The defense is hurting this team. They are winning these games despite the poorest defense right now. So I think them taking ownership shows a lot of character, shows a lot of integrity, a lot of professionalism, a lot of realism. And I think when you look at this particular game, Ryan, to get into the X's and O's of the Cal game itself, two plays really stand out to me, both on the defensive side of the ball, both that the defense really had nothing to do with per se, that they sort of got credit for. One was second quarter, Cal is driving. If you recall, it was 13-7. Cal is 4th and 2 at the SC 31. You're still looking at this game like, what's really happening? What's really going on? Why is Cal even in this game? Justin Wilcox runs the clock down, calls a timeout, comes out of the timeout inexplicably in 5 wide with no back. And on a 4th and 2, it became so predictable that SC was sort of got gift wrapped that stop and ultimately was able to kind of gain a possession and move on from there. And then the other play, Ryan, was right before the half when Jack Plummer inexplicably just sort of threw the ball up in the air. There was no Cal receiver within 15 yards of that throw. Bullock sort of catches it like a punt return man, almost returns it 15 yards. That gives USC the 20-7 lead into the half and ultimately allows the Trojans to prevail. So if those two more self-imposed mistakes by Cal don't happen, we're looking at a nail biter over the course of 4 quarters and at the conclusion of this game. And I think that to me is the more concerning element about this team. And the last point, Ryan, I will say is I think the defense is just too complicated right now under Grinch. You can play this cat and mouse game with an offense of the ability to play zone and then the ability to play man and the ability to have different variations and different combinations at different points of the game when you can play zone well and when you can play man well. And USC right now can't do either. And I think as a result of that, Grinch needs to stop worrying about trying to be a top 10 defense and let's just be a top 40 defense. Let's just do 1 or 2 things really well and acknowledge that we can't do 8 or 9 things really well. But those 1 or 2 things that USC can do really well and just focuses on, that's enough. That's enough to get the 3 stops. That's enough to get, enough possessions for this offense to outscore you. So I think Grinch and Riley need to have a little bit of an existential moment here between the two of them and say, what is attainable? We're in November now. We're 9 games in. You're not going to perform plastic surgery on this defense. It's too late for that. And they're not healthy enough for it. So what are the 1 or 2 things that you can do? Continue the pass rush with Tuipulotu. Continue to, once Gentry comes back, put him on key matchups with that 6'6" frame. Try and eliminate the penalties and really just force teams to have to dink and dunk their way down the field. Ultimately, maybe there's a turnover. Ultimately, there's a penalty that puts them behind the chains and you can manufacture stops. I think that's where the focus really needs to be and say, look, we acknowledge that we're going to give up 30 points a game. But if we only give up 30 points a game, that's plenty good enough for our magician-like quarterback and our great offense to be able to win games. So I think that's where things need to transpire over the next couple of weeks. And my concern right now, Ryan, a little bit is Colorado isn't exactly a great prep game for UCLA. So I'm a little worried also about the level of competition. Arizona, Cal, Colorado are 3 of the 4 worst teams in the Pac-12. And to have to go from that to such a big game, I'm really hoping that Gentry, Goforth, Addison, Mario, even if they can play 10 snaps, but just to be able to get on the field and play, I think is going to be critical because of the first time Jordan Addison plays against UCLA since Utah. That's 5 weeks ago. I don't know what you're going to get out of him. I don't know what you're going to get out of a Gentry. I don't know what you're going to get out of some of these guys. So I think for me, the moral of the story is simplify the scheme defensively and figure out a way to get these guys on the field, even for 10 snaps on Friday night.
Yeah, Lincoln Riley will be available to media Tuesday after practice, so hopefully we'll hear more then. Addison, in my opinion, I think he will go Colorado, even if it's on a snap count. He came out, I don't know if you noticed, Jamal, but at early warmups, so it was early at 5:30 or so. He came out with cleats on in his not street clothes, but in warmups. Did some reps, but then when they came out for padded warmups, he was not. So it looked like he was close. Like he gave it a go early, had cleats on. So that tells me he's real close, was maybe just like a setback away. They want to risk anything. But yeah, I have no idea on Mario, no idea on Gentry, no idea on Goforth. We will see, because that'll be huge. We'll wrap this up here in a minute, but I wanted to comment on a few things you said there. Defensive scheme. I'm going to take a different side, Jamal, and I don't disagree, but just to throw something else out there. What I noticed and what I've noticed over these last few weeks is every time USC has brought a blitzer or extra pressure, they've actually had pretty good success, whether it mean sacking the quarterback or forcing a turnover. I mean, I think even on that Hail Mary punt, if you will, to Bullock, there was some pressure up the middle that forced Jack Plummer to really throw that errant throw, to their credit a little bit. So I think I would almost go that way. If we're sitting here saying, Steven, they're probably going to score anyway. Like, yeah, 3 stops, we say 3-4 stops, what we say is going to get it done. I'd rather, and some people would argue differently, because I know it's very frustrating. We saw UCLA do it last year with their defensive scheme. We even saw USC do it under the Clay Helton years with their defensive scheme. But sometimes it's like, you know what, let's just come with pressure. And if we give up the big play, oh, well, at least our offense gets the ball right back. And we don't have to watch them dink and dunk for 7 minutes and just cut our knees out and just move the ball at will. So I would almost be like, why don't we just do that approach? Let's just bring pressure every other snap, every third snap, bring an extra blitzer, bring the pressure. Maybe we force some turnovers with that. Maybe we get sacks to force some 3 and outs, but at least we're playing aggressive and not just letting them just move the ball at will. And it's almost like more of an ego check for us, or a pride buster, when it's like, we just can't stop anything. At least they beat us over the top because we took a chance. We can say, hey, we tried. Let's see how we can fix that, how to mitigate that. So I would almost go with that approach, because let's be honest, UCLA is going to score on every possession anyway in this, with the way this defense is playing, whether you're playing zone, man, dink and dunk, whatever. So why not just bring 6 pressure DTR and see if you can force him to throw an errant pass? And the other thing I wanted to touch on, just because I'm glad you brought it up, because we were talking about in the press box, that 4th and 2. And first I'll defend Cal, which is, I totally agree with, but I'll just say why I think they did that. Multiple times in this game up to that point, when they went 5 wide, basically forcing USC to go man on man, because you only have so many players, right? So you have 5 deep, you still have 4. That leaves your 2 safeties for a big play. So you're going man on man. Every time they got everything they wanted, whether it was a slant, an out route, a post, whatever. So I think that was the thought process. Hey, every time we've gone 5 wide, we've done what we wanted. But man, I have no problem with teams going for it on 4th down, Jamal. I'm worried of a newer age. It's funny being in the press conference because it's a lot of old journalists that are so anti it. They are all about field goals. They're so anti going for it. They always bring up Brandon Staley and whatnot, even though they don't know what they're talking about half the time. I'm fine going for it. I have no problem. When you're going against USC's defense, or USC's offense, field goals aren't going to win you the game. Like, you have to score touchdowns. So I'm fine with that. But how many times now, and this is in the NFL too, do we see it? 4th and 1, 4th and 2, and you go 5 wide and throw it? Just go I formation, 3 tight ends, and bowl forward for the yard. Like, I will credit USC now, Jamal, 2 games in a row, Arizona and now this game at Cal, into the game. They did it against Cal as well. I think this one was 3rd down, though. Arizona was obviously 4th down. 3rd and 1, had to have your play. What do? Caleb Williams keeps it, runs straight up the gut, and gets the 1st down. Like, why are we going shotgun empty and trying to air it out on 4th down? I don't get why coaches do that. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, Ryan, you have to be able on a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, 4th and 2. You have to be able to give the illusion that you can run or throw. And so at the end of the day, even Caleb was out of shotgun, right? Even for that Arizona game, even for the Cal game. But the key there was it was a run pass option. There were multiple options there, right? Where You hand it off at the mesh point, you keep it, or you keep it with a potential outlet to throw it, right? And that's the new age triple option offense here of the days of the Oklahomas and the Nebraskas in the 70s and the 80s. My biggest concern with Cal was when you go empty, you've taken the run out completely. And now those defenders are just going to sit there knowing that it's 4th and 2 and something quick is coming, because you know that Cal offensive line is too weak to hold even the state of the USC defensive line for very long for Plummer to throw the ball deep. So I just didn't understand that concept whatsoever. And then every time they actually had a back in the backfield and went 4 wide in the second half, they converted every time because there was still an illusion of actually having to be able to run the ball and having to stay honest there. So Ryan, that's my biggest concern. And the one thing I'll counter with a little bit, I completely agree with you about having a single focus and a single identity of pressure. But I don't know if coming with pressure is going to match up well with the big games to come. Look, they could roll anything out against Colorado and win the game 48-7. That's just the reality of Colorado's program right now. So what are we really thinking about? We're thinking about UCLA, Notre Dame, Oregon potentially. And when you look in particular at UCLA and Oregon, DTR and Bo Nix, I think it's a disaster to keep bringing pressure because those guys are natural athletes. Their sort of natural instinct is to want to get out and run and open things up. Where those guys have gotten in trouble historically is that ability to be disciplined, stay in the pocket, have to make reads, have to make progressions, and be able to move the ball down the field. DTR, for the first 4 years of his career at UCLA, that was the big challenge. He's even shown flashes of regressing this year, as great as he's been. Bo Nix, that was the knock on him for 3 years at Auburn. And you saw that opening week against Georgia. He's been great since because he's been able to use his legs and be able to kind of throw the ball off of that and do a really great job. But I think the recipe to beat these two big teams in conference that you have to is you got to find a way to keep them contained in the pocket, make them one-dimensional throwing quarterbacks, and try and take the run out of it. I get a little bit worried about blitzing those guys because I think that's their natural instinct anyway.
No, yeah, 100%. I just don't think they're stopping him regardless. So why not at least make it interesting and see if you bring pressure? Because let's be real. Here's the fact, Jamal. If Gentry can't go against UCLA, I'm not saying USC is guaranteed to lose because their offense is just as good, but they're not stopping UCLA maybe even once. Like if Gentry has to be there to be that QB spy, which is so important, and we saw it against Arizona when he was out and Delora was able to just break, contain, and run at will. That is what Gentry is so good at, and that is what he has to do against UCLA with DTR. If he's out, UCLA is scoring every single drive unless they have a forced error on their own. So that's going to be huge. And I would say if Gentry's even 95%, hold him out against Colorado almost. Like, let's just get him 100%. Otherwise, there's no shot slowing down UCLA.
No, Ryan, I've said it for a couple of weeks now. You and I have really enjoyed that conversation. I think that game's going to come down to Caleb, Dye, and Gentry versus DTR, Charbonnet, Latu. I think everyone else is going to pretty much cancel each other out in terms of Addison and Mario and Bobo and Cam Brown and the Murphy twins and Tuipulotu and all of that. I think you're going to get really good performances. Which of those three, that big three for this game, plays better is going to win that game. So Gentry is absolutely paramount to USC's success moving forward, of whether or not they're going to be playing Georgia in a college football semifinal or playing a middle-tier Big Ten team in San Diego in the Holiday Bowl. It really rests, as crazy as it sounds, on Gentry because you know Caleb is Caleb. You know what you're going to get. He's a maestro. He's a magician. Best quarterback in the country. You know what you're going to get from Dye in terms of the versatility out of the backfield and in the passing game. It's that third element. Gentry, to make things difficult for a Charbonnet, for a DTR, it's absolutely critical because you just don't have 6'6" linebackers in college football. And what he can bring in terms of range, in terms of coverage, is just so unique and can very well be the difference for USC in that game and in terms of their season.
100%. So can't wait. We are doing a special Victory Bell show mini-series, if you will. Episode 1 is already out. Episode 2 will be dropping Tuesday night. Episode 3 will be dropping the following Tuesday with a culmination of a live show at the Rose Bowl on November 19th. It's myself hosting, Jamal Madney, Will Decker, who hosts our Bruin Bible. We got Alfred Rowe, former Trojan. Phil Robinson is his co-host of Salute to Troy. So it's a really fun roundtable we do, the Victory Bell Selection Show. Make sure to check that out on LAFBnetwork.com for everything involving the history of that game, the matchup of these two teams, culminating with the game itself here in 2 weeks. So check that out. Last thing, Jamal, and we're signing off because I just got to always end with the positive. That play that Caleb Williams, if you remember, I can't remember what quarter it was. You probably will because you just have the photographic memory. But he did the double spin move to evade pressure. He spun and then spun again. Almost it looked too early. Like the defender was like 5 yards from him, but it was such a acrobatic or a showmanship spin move that the guy still bit on it. And then he ended up hitting a dart like 30 yards down the field. Kid's just special. Kid is just special, man.
He's honestly, it's Mahomes like. It's just, I think Caleb, he's got that element to it. That cool factor that Mahomes has. He just the blood pressure never goes above a certain level. With guys like Mahomes, Steph Curry, Caleb Williams, they just have that cool factor and just supreme ability in their talents, and just have incredible confidence in what they can do. We're watching one of the greats at USC and one of the greats in college football, and it's going to be we're so lucky that we get him one more year. And there's really an opportunity to put something really special together. Matt Leinart said it. He tweeted it during the game. It was on the big board of the Coliseum. 32 touchdowns, total touchdowns on the season, passing and rushing. Only one interception. I mean, my goodness, that is absolutely ridiculous, and something that has been done very rarely in this sport, both college and pro.
Wild. So, I'm glad you brought up Mahomes. I hate when people compare college quarterbacks to the greats of our game, but I think that's fair. Like, I think this is finally one we can say, like, this kid is playing at a Mahomes level, especially collegiately, but he has the same tool belt that Mahomes has. And he can do it with his legs. He can do it with his arm. You mentioned the charisma. You mentioned the leadership, all of that. Like, it is very Mahomes-like, and it's very real, and it's very fair. And it's not, sometimes it's unfair to do that to players because they put so much pressure on him, but he would do that himself. He puts that pressure on himself. So we're seeing great. We got Colorado this weekend. We'll have the preview show later in the week, but USC, as bad as maybe the game was, as unexciting a win feels, this team is still 8-1. They're top 10 in the nation. Everything still sits in front of them for them to take. Now it's about improving a little bit in certain areas and taking it and making this season an unforgettable one. So with that, for Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dyer. This is the LA Football Show, your Trojan Huddle. We'll be back there in the week with your preview of Colorado. Everyone be well, fight on. We'll talk soon.